I think, well, a lot of the arguments people have about the movie is, who's the protagonist, and I'm wondering how much was that your argument, even with yourself?
That is the late Francis Xavier Finney and Paul Thomas Anderson talking about the dynamics between Freddie Quayle and Lancaster Dodd in The Master. They particularly referencing the non-classical nature of PTA screenwriting, in the sense that when you watch PTA's film, you struggle to spotlight certain characteristics that you can easily spotlight in another film. Like, what are the three acts? Who is the bad guy? What is this film actually trying to do?
What's this movie about?
None of us could figure it out, and it wasn't like someone could figure it out and someone else didn't agree with it. It was really just it's too hard to describe, so let's just say here's who's in it, these are the characters, and, I could probably go on forever about what it's about, but, you'd hate me in the morning.
That was PTA trying to answer a question about Magnolia. And you could ask him the same question about some of his other movies and get the same reaction. Of course, PTA knows what Magnolia means to him. He knows what he was trying to do with the movie. But usually, when you watch a movie, you have an understanding of what the movie is objectively about. And that objective understanding remains, regardless of how broad or narrow the interpretations of the movie become. However, for several PTA movies, there's always a struggle to define what the movie is objectively about. For instance, there's still no consensus on what One Battle After Another is actually about. And even now, people still go on the internet to ask what Inherent Vice is about, or what the Master is saying, and what Magnolia actually means, and on and on. For many filmmakers, this would be because the movie was jarring, or just bad. For PTA, this is a feature. And to understand what I mean by that, we have to go back to Magnolia. I've watched every PTA film, from R8 to One Battle After Another, and the more I go back and watch, the clearer it is that Magnolia was the first domino. It is a film you watch, and you see how well it utilized elements that would later characterize PTA's filmmaking style. It is the first time everything really came together.
I hate coming here and not being able to talk.
PTA has a musical approach to filmmaking. It's not just because he loves using sound to evoke emotions in his viewers. It's not just because of the dynamic ways he uses cutting. It's not because PTA himself loves music to the extent that he actually goes out of his way to direct music videos. It's because PTA is obsessed with reading. The rhythm of a film is one of the things that end up determining how good the film eventually turns out. Usually, rhythm is partly established during production, but mostly curated in post-production. But in Magnolia, rhythm plays a much more important role than you typically see in a film. There's rhythm in the cuts, the camera movement, the music, and even the way characters act. Every character has its own rhythm. For instance, Linda Partridge is in a state of emotional breakdown when we meet a character. She's overwhelmed with guilt, she's dependent on drugs, and she's psychologically strained. As a result, there's a rhythm in her scenes that feels like it's trying to reflect panic.
Fuck. Feels over the top with everything.
Look, running out of your medication at all, let alone at a time like this, could be drastic.
Thank you, Dr. Diane.
On the other hand, Phil is a nurse taking care of Elle Partridge, Linda's husband. Elle is dying. He's filled with regrets. He wishes to see his estranged son. He wishes he could go back and undo the things that ruined his marriage. But he can't do anything. He's just there on his sick bed, hoping for one more good moment. And it feels like there's a rhythm to their scenes that feels steady and grounded. Yet, despite having characters with different rhythms, Magnolia doesn't feel jarring. In fact, there are moments where Phil and Elle's steady rhythm comes immediately after Linda's panic-like rhythm, which came immediately after Claudia's frenzied rhythm. And altogether, it just doesn't feel jarring at all.
What time?
8 o'clock.
I don't get off until 10.
10 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Unlike what you would see in many other films, the sense of rhythm in Magnolia isn't just being created with usual components like editing and sound, or even in usual ways. PTA uses every component to foster this sense of rhythm. Even its trademark complex camera movement has a distinct feel that depends on what the scene is trying to do. Sometimes the camera movement is swift, Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's not moving. One of the unusual ways PTA creates a sense of reading is the use of repetition. I once read an essay by Canadian filmmaker Jacob Pascoe where he explained how a film can use repetition as a form of reading to lull the mind into a trance-like state. Like you would see in many films, Magnolia does this with sound. But unlike you would see in many films, Magnolia also does it with dialogue. It's not that PTA uses a repeated phrase that ends up being meaningful or something. It's really just fanciful. The repetition of certain words or phrases is solely done to create a sense of reading, which sometimes is for the purpose of reflecting what the inner state of a character feels like, or to evoke viewers' emotions, or to even make you think something important is going to happen. But really, it's usually just for cinematic purposes.
Whatever you think that I think, and on, you should just say it, whatever it is, and I'll listen to you.
You don't know how fucking stupid I am.
It's okay.
You don't know how crazy I am.
It's okay.
When a component as common and critical as dialogue is used in such a rhythmic way without watering down the conversation between characters, you get a sense of why PTA films feel a certain way. When every component of a film has its own life and is playing a significant role in the direction of the film, the result is a film that entices you into thinking something important is always about to happen, even when something important hasn't happened and might not happen. The result is a film that immerses you into the purity of its own cinematic world in a way that makes whatever story it's telling somewhat secondary. What makes this an effective approach is that it's complemented by how PTA develops characters and advances its stories. We feel something important is going to happen, and we wonder if something important will happen. The reason we feel that way is because PTA feels the exact same way, and it asks the exact same question. Will something important happen in the film that it is making? He usually doesn't know the answer to that.
I think we got to this point after point in the movie where we were at pivotal decisions with the character, and working with Paul, you just don't take the obvious choice.
Modern films are filled with talking and exposition because they are very typical ways to develop characters and advance stories. But in many of those films, you can see that it's bad writing. You can see that the dialogue and exposition are being used because they are relatively easier ways to advance stories, not because they are the best ways to advance stories given the context of the stories. And we are kind of in an era that seems to expose such an approach less than it should be exposed. So when you watch a PTA film, which tends to be complete antithesis of that approach, you might feel entertained, but also kind of like lost. Let's go back to this conversation between Francis Finney and PTA about the difficulty of figuring out who the protagonist is in The Master. Being puzzled about the way a character is being written in any PTA film is not a rare phenomenon. The first time I experienced this was watching the scene between Frank T.J. Mackey and Guenovia. It also happens to be one of the scenes that best characterizes how PTA writes.
It's my understanding that the information supplied by you and your company and the answers to the questions that I've asked is incorrect, Frank.
Frank is a confident and charming self-help guru who teaches men how to be a pickup artist. He's a protagonist in the movie, while Guenovia's first and only appearance is in this scene. But watching it didn't feel that way. The dynamics felt like that of two main characters who had been on a very interesting journey and are now facing defining moments. Guenovia had not appeared in this movie and would not appear after this scene. Yet, the culmination of the scene felt like I was watching two main characters. With every word she utters and every expression she wears, PTA is showing us as many details about this character as we've gotten about TJ Mackey, who had been in the movie from the start. PTA is able to establish this character's motive in the same scene she would fulfill her objective, in the same scene that she would only appear, without using exposition or unnecessary talking. Before she even started the interview, I could sense what she was about to do to Frank. And at the peak of the interview, it felt like I was watching two characters with equal significance to the film.
Well, I guess my question's this. Why would you lie, Frank?
The first thing to unpack in this scene is the sudden flip. The way Guenovia went from being a supporting character that we're just seeing for the first time to gradually looking like a main character that we've been seeing for a while. Throughout PTA's filmography, you will see characteristics like that in different forms. Like the conversation between Francis Finney and PTA, about the fascinating and potent dynamics of Freddie Quayle and Lancaster Dodd, or when you watch Phantom Thread and you become astounded by the possibility of a character being an antagonist and at the same time a complement of the protagonist. Or in There Will Be Blood, where Dan Plainview is an obvious villain, but the character that is supposed to antagonize him is actually another villain. These dynamics are scattered across PTA's filmography. The second thing to unpack is how PTA is able to reveal a lot about Genovia just through what she was doing. Watching her in this scene, you learn that she's someone who has an intimate knowledge of who Frank is, and an intimate knowledge of how exactly to get him. She's a character who didn't just prepare to interview Frank, she prepared to destroy him. This is another characteristic you see throughout PTA's filmography. PTA likes to tell you who a character is, what they are seeking, and why they're doing what they do through their actions. Doc Spotello is a very good example of this. For the majority of the movie, there are lingering questions about what the character wants. He lives a life of banality that seems to be caught in a loop of repeating the same patterns. He repeats these patterns over and over again in a way that leaves you asking where the character's journey is heading. But then we get to a point in the movie where the character is faced with a decision. And at that moment, we get an answer.
Those I represent are prepared to offer you a generous compensation package for the safe return of their property.
Suppose it didn't have to be in the form of money.
This is how PTA makes movies. He writes characters that show you who they are, not tell you who they are. He creates complex stories that make multiple characters equally significant, but at the same time, dispensable. He establishes twisted dynamics between characters in a way that has you guessing who the protagonist is, or whether to root for the guy that is supposed to be the good one. And then he maximizes the form of the movie as a means to help tell the story. The camera movement feels like a component that has a life of its own. The editing is telling you not to keep your eyes away. The sound has its own thing going. And even the dialogue is doing something other than acting as a means of communication.
She's possessed. She's got Spotted Dick blacklight posters on the wall, Spotted Dick sheets and pillowcases on the bed, Spotted Dick...
So when you watch one battle after another, and you feel deeply gratified, but you can't really explain what PTA is trying to tell you, then yeah, that's somehow the point, but also not the point. It's so PTA-like, and it talks late with Magnolia. Ultimately, I'm not sure you could have made a movie like one battle after another if you hadn't made a movie like Magnolia. Magnolia is a very, very important movie in PTA's filmography.